Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Today's guest is V.D. Dalton II, author of True Gravity. He helps business owners and directors build a business for sale by making his clients 3D trusted advisors, building a power marketing teams and ultimately amplifying their wealth. Bart has built $1 million and £1 million companies in the US and UK and continues to be an investor in inspiring companies and inspiring people. His passion is making sure people build true gravity to have a chance to learn from their mistakes before they make them. Welcome, Bart.
Hey, thank you very much, Richard. Thanks for having me on the show.
No problem at all. Bart, describe your perfect prospect. Who do you have?
Well, interestingly enough, we have people like you, Richard, are my perfect prospects because, we've had chats before, is you've built up an extensive network of people, and sometimes it's how you evaluate it, how you come back into the network and look at a successful way to moderate and talk to people and tell them what you want and ask for them to come back to you and say, here's what I'm expecting from you and here's what I'm going to give you. It's people who want to earn more money and work less, which is pretty much all of us. Even though some of us say that we want to not work or we love our work, we really don't want to be doing that. We want to do the things that the money can afford us, which is creating opportunities. And people who ultimately have a business that want to build wealth but don't know how to do it. They know how to make sales. They know how to make really good widgets. They know how to do all these things, but they don't know what that means when it comes to wealth and getting ready to sell their businesses or pass it on to their kids or ride off into the sunset and retire.
Excellent. How do you help them? What are the 2 or 3 problems, real or perceived, that you solve for them? Why was the interest in what you have to say about?
Well, I call the people that work with me kind of astronauts, and I refer to them as the 5% because the studies have proven, and we've gone through quite a few different things, and a lot of people that have written books on successful people and wealth, and I consider wealth to be money, but it's also the things that money can afford you, the opportunities, because you can die very rich. And they say there's no checkbooks or there's no money in a graveyard, and so it's one of those that you have to look at building wealth. And why somebody would come to me is I've gone through the last 20 years and looked back at the things I've done, and I've built a 3-booster rocket that blasts off and takes people into their wealth into the stratosphere, if you want to, and I do it in the way of True Gravity, which is the book. It's about looking at your black book. It's about evaluating it and making sure that people can understand the people that they've gone out and brought into their world, how they can evaluate the relationships and where it's going, and ultimately how they can make sure that they're spending time with the people that are really going to count and make a difference in their business. We all have a lot of big networks, and I'm sure you do, don't you, Richard?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we have multiple LinkedIn contacts. We have all these different things that are out there that we measure the number of people we have. But when you ultimately go back and look at it, and I had one of my clients suffered a heart attack about 18 months ago, and he has about 1,300 LinkedIn contacts. And when I asked him, I said, how many of those contacts actually knew that you had a life-changing event? And he said, well, probably about 200 of them. So 200 out of 1,300 people knew that he had actually had what could have killed him. And then I said, so how many responses or how many things off of those 200 did you get of people that were well-wishing or saying, get better soon? I think he said it ended up being about 30. So when you actually look at the True Gravity and the people that could affect that guy's life, who had spent his whole life coaching, running seminars, all these different things, he looked at it and said, out of my 1,300 LinkedIn contacts, and we don't measure it, but it's a measure of what we do and how we have our network. He only had 30 out of 1,300. So really brought home that your black book, just because it's very, very fat, doesn't mean that you're going to have a lot of wealth. So that was true gravity for the networking. The second part was 3G, and the 3G advisor is, I believe that there are 3 people you have to become a trusted advisor. And one of those is the guide. And the guide is the person that says, Richard, come with me, and we're going to go find the answer to this. We're going to do it together because you and I know your goal, and we're going to go here. So I'm going to guide you to this. I'm not just going to say, go find it yourself. I'm not going to give you a bunch of documents. I'm not going to let you surf the internet. I'm going to say, let's go find this together. So that's your guide. Your second one is your guru. So, Richard, you've done what you've done for a long time. You coach people to make sure that they can get through to their wealth and add to the bottom line and reduce the amount of time that they spend doing it. And so you've been there, done that. CNN, Amazon top bestseller, all that type of stuff. So you're the guru. So you're that second G, which is the trust me, I've been there, I've done that. And the last one is gladiator. So the last of the 3 is the gladiator. And the gladiator stands back and says, Richard, you've allowed me into your world. I'm coaching you now or working with you now. And you've said, I want to reach this goal. And so you've given me the shield and the armor and the sword to go out and fight for that. I might have to fight you. I might have to fight somebody else for it. But if you say that I'm going to deviate from that goal, you have to tell me why, because if not, I'm going to fight you for it. So if you say that I want to have a top-rated podcast and you start focusing on your internet sales, or you start focusing on your book sales or things like that, I'm going to fight for you and say, let's go back and focus on that goal, and because you've given me that goal to fight for you. So the 3Gs, the 3G advisor, to get into that trusted advisor status is an important thing. So we've gone your network, we've gone how you're going to sell and how you're going to become a trusted advisor. And the last one is, and this is the big thing, this comes from my wealth management background, is enterprise value and increasing the value of your business. And I've had many times in the wealth management world where people have come to me and said, I'm getting ready to sell my business in about 2 years, and I'm going to be bringing you a check for £5 million or $5 million. I said, that's great. That's amazing. And in the wealth management world, the more money you control for a client, the more money you make for them and for you. So I thought that was great. And 2 years later, almost without fail, those clients come back to me with a smaller check, a £2 million check or a $3 million check, because they didn't understand the value of their business. They didn't put the systems in place to make sure that the business was valued at the £5 million that they thought it was going to be. Because when they go out and do it, it's usually like getting married or getting a divorce. You typically only do it once. So they'll go to sell their business, and it'll only be valued at X. But then when somebody starts to pull it apart, and they start going in and they start looking at the way the business has been built, they're going to tear it apart. And I've written an article on LinkedIn that says, nobody likes to have their baby called ugly. But when somebody comes in and starts looking at your business, because it's a buy and a sell, somebody is going to call your baby, the business that you've built for so many years, ugly, because they want to pay less for it. So they'd come to me because I have those ultimately 3-stage rockets to get them to the point where they need to be successful as soon as they walk out of those seminars or read the book.
Okay. How do you solve that problem, Bart? I mean, what is your magic, your expertise? Why do they become your clients?
Well, ultimately, it's the funny thing is I'm a person that talks about networking and networking being dead. And I'm probably fairly extensively networked. But over the past 15 years, I've worked with international companies, inside of international companies. I've built companies myself. I've helped people sell companies. So the big thing that I can do, and when somebody sits down with me and says, well, I need some help doing this, I make connections. I'm a huge connector of people. I try to make sure that I can find answers for them the minute I sit down with them, whether that's finding them a client, whether that's finding them a joint venture partner, whether that's finding them finance or a new way of looking at their business so that they can monetize it. So it's that knack of standing outside of their business at a helicopter view and pointing them in a direction that hopefully will, or typically ends up adding to their bottom line, or, and this is the part that makes it more fun, is that they have the same bottom line, but they do it in less time and have more fun doing it.
Great. What are the one or two popular misconceptions about the service you provide and all the results it produces?
Well, one of the big misconceptions is that you need to have a huge black book to get rich. And I believe, and I've pointed it out and I've proven it, is that the old adage is you can only have three best friends because you don't have the time or the effort or the energy to go out and spend on all these people, to go out and build relationships to a level where people are going to trust you on a regular basis. So having a huge black book to get rich is one of those misconceptions that's out there. And the second one is that you have to pay lots to have a great marketing plan and to execute it. When I go through my book, I have essentially about 4 pages that talk about building a marketing plan and then using it to hunt in packs. And that's one of my favorite topics in the entire book is hunting in packs. And I teach people how to make sure that they've got the right story. They go out and they make sure that they don't pitch themselves. Say, almost, if you and I were working in the room together, Richard, I would present you and talk about how great you are at turning people's businesses around and that you're an amazing author and speaking engagements where you change people's lives, and give you almost a verbal testimonial in front of the people that we're talking to. So because if you say that, then you sound like you're bragging. If I say that, then I've instantly broken the trust barrier for you to then be able to, probably being humble as you are, you'd blush a little bit, and then you'd be able to kind of interject into the conversation. So it's that marketing and how to use it. You don't have to pay lots of money for it, but the more sincere and the more concise it is, the easier it is to make it effective when you're making money for people or you're helping people with solutions.
Excellent. What do you think is the main reason that a person you can help most decides not to buy from you, be your client? Is it price, time commitment? What others would you think of? Not convinced it will work for them?
Yeah, actually, some of those are kind of fun. The first one typically is they've, and I kind of liken it to a personal training session, is that when people go out there and they think, okay, it's January 1st, we're coming into the new year, and I'm going to have a whole new me. So they go and have, they read a book on self-improvement and eating right, and then they go to the gym once or twice, and maybe they get a little bit sore afterwards, and maybe they do that stuff, and then they start to slow down. So they think that diets and personal training don't work for them because they stop. So it's that really thing is they've been coached before. So whether that's in their business, in their personal life, but they've been coached before and it didn't work for them, so they don't see the value in it. The second thing is, and just like the exercise, it's accountability scares them. So when you actually sit down and you look at, and I know lots and lots of people that are out there going to breakfast meetings that they present at or they go to, and they've been going at it for years and years and years. They go every Thursday morning at 6:30 in the morning, and they go to this. But nobody's ever held them to account for the time that they're spending there, the effort that they put into it, the time and all the other one-to-one coffees and all that type of stuff. When you actually look at it and say, what does it actually return to you for all of the money that you put into it and all the time and effort you put into it, they become accountable for that money. And if it was a business, you'd have to account for it. But because most people that I work with are budding entrepreneurs and going to new places and they've always been the boss, they're not accountable to anybody, and that scares them when you say, okay, we need to report back in on this, and coaching scares them because they've never been accountable to anybody besides being able to pay the bills that month or pay the tax man. And then the very last one is, and you talked about this right at the beginning, was the price to value misconception. When you look at the courses that I run, anywhere from 750 to 6,000 pounds over differing time frames. When I look at the 6,000 pound course, it covers 12-month period, and all that really takes is 3 new clients, and they're typically the best clients because I've taught them how to clone those clients that they have in the beginning and that they want to have more of. I teach them how to clone them and grow them. So essentially I can return the value that they put into that in time and in money within 3 clients, and that usually takes me about 3 months. So they've had all these chances where we talked about where they've been burnt by other people that they've paid money to, and it might not have been the coach themselves. It might have been the way that business person used that coach. So ultimately it comes back to that value for money misconception. They think that if I'm going to pay 6,000 pounds for a course, how am I going to get my money back? Because that's a lot of money for me right now. And so people don't understand what they're getting for their money. And part of that comes down to you and I, Richard, is proving to them what we've done before. But it really comes back down to them understanding what they're trying to do and being able to buy into them putting their weight and effort behind it to make sure that they get that value for money of 6,000 pounds.
Sure. Is there anything else you'd like to add about for our listeners?
Really, just as I've been going through this and I've been traveling around the country and I've been talking to people, I'm looking at the way that people can improve what they're doing, and I look in the 3G process. You have to ask yourself what questions or what killer questions you're making people ask of themselves to buy the product or the service that you're going out there. So my thought to people is, at the end of this broadcast, you can go to my website at www.bartdaltonconsulting.com and download a couple of the worksheets on there for free. But the thing that you need to do going into anything you're doing is finding 2 killer questions that make somebody think. And one of those that I added on one of the blogs that I put out there was, describe the best customer service that you've ever had. So that client will go through, well, we went away on our honeymoon. We went to Sandals in the Bahamas, and they were amazing because they did this, this, and this. And that is where you have to be their 3G advisor, to be their trusted advisor. Is you might not be able to put a swan towel wrapped up on their bedside, but you need to figure out how you can deliver that type of service to them, or how you can make them feel like they were back in the Bahamas on their honeymoon. How do you make those touch points go through there? So having your 2 killer questions will then tee up how you're going to treat those perfect clients. And the big thing that I've started doing, and we did this a lot over the last 2 years now, is customer surveys are a huge, huge benefit to your business, because you know what your top clients and the clients actually that are not your top clients are the ones that are actually leaving you possibly. Hopefully we don't have a lot of those, but those customer surveys or exit surveys help you so much in delivering better service. So those 2 killer questions. But then when I've presented, and this is the thing that when I've talked about true gravity and making everything happen, I have an A3 sheet of paper, which is, for people in the US, it's 2, almost 3 regular size sheets of 8.5 by 11 paper that has the universe map that I've drawn out there, starting from left to right, starts with you and goes out to the asteroids and other planetary bodies, which I talk about in the book. But it's amazing when I get people to write things down, and I'm sure you do this for your clients too, Richard, is get them to write it down. when people start going through the map and writing in names of themselves, what they're looking for, and then their primary planets, which are I would call your 3 best friends, your primary planets, when they start going in there, and it actually starts scaring them, because they might have 1,300 people in their LinkedIn or their Facebook or anything like that, but they can't actually write down more than one name of somebody that would help them that day. And that's a scary thought when people like you or I have been networking for 15, 20 years, and they cannot come up with 3 names of people that would actually help them today grow their business if they only had a year left in the business before they were going to sell it, or they were going to go on a sabbatical or anything like that. So to sit down and have people write things out and put it on paper and see it visually, because I'm a visual learner. So write it down and see, okay, how am I going to do this? And then you can write the story out and the things you're going to talk to. And then you move out to your secondary planets, which are usually about 5 other people. When people start to write these things down and visually put it on paper and then share it with somebody, that's the most powerful thing that I've seen in any of the tours that I've done around the UK. It's been exceptional to see, and scary to me, to have people that are serial networkers start at the beginning, sit back like you and I would, Richard, because we've been to so many of these things, sit back and say, oh, I've heard this before. Sit back, lean back, look at me, and start to stare off, or, even worse, pull their phone out. And then I start to ask a question going around the room and get people start thinking. And once I hit that question of, how many people do you have in your LinkedIn database? And then I want you to use the map, and I want you to write down 3 people that would help you today. They look at it, they can only write down 1 or 2, and then they start to get scared. And now they've engaged, and they come back into the room, and they start focusing on what we're talking about, because now the stuff I'm going to talk about actually pertains to them. And when I looked back on this 2 years ago, before I started the experiment to go through and build the True Gravity process, I couldn't put more than 1 person in there, and that scared me, and that's why I went and did it. So that was the wake-up call. But it really comes back down to, if you have those 2 killer questions, if you write it down and actually make it almost a picture or a graphic representation, then that's very powerful, and it'll add impetus to the changes that you need to make.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Bart, for your time today and sharing your expertise with our listeners.
No problem. The only thing that I always say as I leave is, and this is my little catchphrase, is that if you want to work for the rest of your life, that's your business, and if you don't, that's mine. So that's my little fun quote that makes people think at the end.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Bart. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Richard.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.